What? Ugh.
Gorgax blinked awake. He immediately felt heady from the stench of promethium fumes, the thick smog of vehicular industry mixing with the damp stink of 1,000 pressed orcs. He grunted, tried to move, and found he couldn't. He was bolted to a vertical operating table, iron rivets fused to a crude slab on a gear-operated rotation. Dust tickled at his flaring nostrils, tasting like blood in the back of his throat. He spat phlegm on the ground, eyes adjusting to the sparking lights of soldering and metal sawing. He soon realized he was in a mech shop. Dozens of orky whatnots span, fizzed and beeped, lopsided shelves sagging under the weight of junk and failed experiments. Grots scampered to and fro, covered in oil and soot, laboring under heaps of wires and cogs and gears, milling in a mad pattern. Gorgax couldn't understand.
Keep still, boss. We're getting to the killy bits.
A mech boy appeared from a haze of black smoke, grinning ear to ear as he chewed on a huge cigar. A metal bar ran through his nose, ending with a cog piercing on either nostril, his eyes hidden behind blackened soldering goggles that constantly shifted between tinted and prey sight red. One shoulder bore a heavy mech apparatus, supported by a rough exoskeleton of rebars bolted into his torso, the occasional zap of aluminum sparking at a passing grot. He held up a mess of wires and a red-hot poker. Gorgax wasn't sure what the tools were for, but he didn't much like the look of them.
Zog this!
Boss! Oi! Keep still! I'll zogging gawk, you stupid git!
Gorgax struggled, the veins across his chest popping as giant pectoral muscles tensed and strained. He roared, gnashing at the air as he wrenched himself free one arm at a time, rivets shearing away and bolts exploding from the table. One hit a grot in the head, knocking him out cold, half buried beneath the junk previously stacked on his spindly arms. Another span towards one of the shelves, hitting a flashy whatnot that immediately burst into acrid stinking flames. A couple of grots ran over with a fire extinguisher, putting it out with an efficiency that suggested plenty of prior experience.
Who you calling stupid?
Gorgax grabbed the mech boy by the neck, but his tone changed when he realized what he held the mech boy with.
What's this then?
The mech boy struggled in the grips of Gorgax's new power claw, the shears cutting deep into the wrinkled scar tissue of his neck. The claw was grotesquely huge, bolted onto an oversized orc bionic that replaced Gorgax's shattered hook arm and gave him an extra half-meter of reach. Gorgax admired the sheer bulk of his new shoulder, the slabs of hard scrap thick enough to stop a bolt round, festooned with extra sparking spiky bits, for shouldering his way through walls and flesh. The mass of it should have left him feeling lopsided and encumbered, but for a reason Gorgax couldn't fathom, it seemed a perfect fit.
I made it for you, boss. Custom job. Made it nice and killy, yeah? Now, would you mind letting me down?
Gorgax dropped the mech boy to the ground.
What's your name?
Boombox, boss.
The mech boy pulled a face at the mess of wires still in his hand.
Sorry, boss. Thought you would have needed this gumph, but I think it's working. You probably would have exploded by now anyhow if you were gonna.
I don't need no zappy gumph to move me own arm, Boombox. But enough about that. Where's the boys I brought with me?
Gorgax! Is that you? Help! Ow!
Gorgax frowned at the rogue trader and the seneschal, the two humans struggling in gibbet cages hung from a pair of lifting claws. As usual, the git was complaining. Though, given his knee was inside out, Gorgax decided to let it go. The rogue trader was also injured, a big bump on his head from the earlier crash, the skin an angry purple where it had impacted with the steering wheel.
All right, let them down.
As the lifting claws started to descend, Gorgax vaguely wondered why the clan of orcs were obeying him. Whenever he glared at one, they shrunk back from him, scraping at the floor with their feet and calling him boss. It was a little confusing, but it felt right. Gorgax made his way towards the rogue trader, smiling at the tremors that reverberated from his footfalls. Boombox had replaced his missing peg leg too, swapping it out for a stomping monster of a limb. Metal claws dug into the ground, pistons and hydraulics belching steam and smoke. The lower leg supplemented with half a dozen red rockets. According to Boombox, Gorgax could use those rockets to jump, but he still wasn't sure if he could trust the mech boy's wild claims.
Open them up! The cages, not the Umis!
The rogue trader smiled gratefully as a couple of lads let him out, stretching out his neck to enjoy a full range of movement. He glanced at Gorgax, frowning slightly.
Is that really you, Gorgax?
Who else would it be? And why have you shrunk? Did they chop off your feet a bit?
I don't think I've shrunk, my friend. I think you might have grown.
Oh, right then.
That's normal then?
Suppose.
Boss.
Gorgax turned. A small gaggle of orcs had just released the seneschal from his cage, but instead of walking it off, the git had simply collapsed to the ground. His face was as white as a sheet, his eyes rolling back in his skull as he moaned in quiet agony. The orc that had spoken went to give the seneschal a kick, but thought better of it when he saw Gorgax's expression.
What you want us to do with him, boss?
Get him patched up with the doc. No bionics though. He wouldn't like that.
The rogue trader nodded approvingly, watching as the group of orcs half carried, half dragged the semi-conscious seneschal between two trucks and out of sight.
Thank you, Gorgax. You sure they won't hurt him?
Nah, not unless they want to get crumped. Doc will hurt in mind, but that's the way it is.
Indeed. You seem different, Gorgax.
Yeah?
Well, you're physically bigger, which, well, is fine, I'm sure. But you also seem, I don't know, I would have said more assertive. But it's not as though you were a blushing violet before.
What's a violet?
Oh, a purple flower.
How'd you find them then?
I'm not sure I understand, my friend.
Gorgax rolled his eyes.
Never mind. How'd they blush?
It's a Hume expression, my green friend. What I mean to say is that you seem more confident somehow. You seem in charge.
Oh yeah? I'm thinking I am, boss.
And how do you feel about that? Gorgax shrugged.
Guess I must have crumped Freeboota well good. Is what it is.
Oh yes, he's extremely dead. In truth, Gorgax, I was a little concerned that you might be too.
Nah. Starting to think I can't get deaded.
Ha! Well, I must say you have survived more than your fair share of fatal injuries in the past.
Gorgax nodded, distracted by his new claw.
So, what happened after the crump?
Well, Gorgax, that is something of a story in itself. Well, as you might remember, my green friend, our vehicle was hurtling towards Mr. Freeboota Esquire's vehicle. We are picking up a fair amount of speed, and then you tell me to stop. So I stop.
I already know this bit.
I know that, but don't you want to know what it looked like from my eyes? You looked extremely impressive.
Go on then.
I hit the brakes, hard. Unbeknownst to me, you fashioned some manner of device that... I'm sorry, Gorgax, I'll get to the point. You fly through the air on the strength of our momentum. You are like a green cannonball hurtling through the air. You are, as Sebastian Yarrick might have said, a thunderbolt from a clear sky. Your hook arm is outstretched, the feathers on your rather fetching hat are slicked back, and BAM! You hit poor Freeboota directly in the chest.
Right where you shot him.
Just so. And, apparently, you hit a fair bit harder than a plasma round. My sharp braking has kicked up a great plume of dust, so I only catch a glimpse of the impact. But what I see is nothing short of spectacular, my friend. You go through him, blood and guts flying every which way. and then you seem to crumple like a crash zone. And then everything explodes. I confess I'm not quite sure why there was an explosion.
Everything good explodes. The big boom is how you know it's proper.
I think you are entirely right. In any case, it rounds off the proceedings with an appropriately large bang. Freeboota wagon has exploded, bits of orcs and scrap are flying in every direction, and time just seems to stop. I call out your name, Gorgax! And in truth, I am quite worried that you've been splattered.
Suppose I was, boss.
Yes, but I didn't imagine you'd recover from it.
Yeah.
So there we are. You've taken Freeboota out of the equation, but from what I can see, you're also out for the count. And there's still rather a lot of orcs left, who are rapidly recovering from the shock of their war boss, separating into 100 or so pieces. Trucks with flatbeds full of greenskins, buggies with flamethrowers and bulky machine guns, track-mounted weapons with dozer blades and rams and wrecking balls. It's rather the menagerie of 1,000 things that can kill us 1,000 times over.
What's a menagerie?
It's a place for putting strange creatures in. I've been meaning to ask Lewis if we can refurbish Cargo Hold 7 for the purpose, but I think he's on to me. Whenever I'm about to ask him about it, he distracts me with some other matter. I have such ideas, Gorgax. All those monstrous and deadly creatures we've encountered on our adventures, all in one place.
You sure that's a good idea, boss?
Of course! We could do tours for visiting aristocrats. But anyway, the 100 wheels of the recently departed Freeboota are all arranged before us, gathering their wits and getting ready to murder us. That's when Lewis decides to fire the zappy cannon again.
Oh yeah! I remember he was proper having fun.
Indeed. I think it had something to do with the painkillers I'd given him. It was quite a potent concoction. Let's not beat around the bush, Gorgax. Lewis was completely out of it.
What?
Huh?
What you mean, beat round the bush?
Oh, I just mean that we should be explicit about what was his current state of mind.
Why would you beat round a bush, though? Who you cramping? And why is there a bush there?
You know, Gorgax, I couldn't tell you. But I should return to the story. Lewis hollers something incoherent about the Great War in the sky, and he fires his cannon at the closest vehicle. It's a big truck strapped to a space rocket, a dozen or so orcs hanging off the frame. And to his credit, he does very well. The zap strikes the space rocket, and, of course, it explodes it in an unnecessarily dramatic manner. Then all hell breaks loose. The spell of timelessness is shattered. The clan revs their engines, starts speeding towards us, and their charge is preempted by thousands of bullets and corkscrew rockets. There's no chance our vehicle can take the onslaught, so I tell everyone to abandon ship and jump out of the side door. Lewis decides to leap from the tower like he's expecting to fly, shadowed by a couple of quick-witted Gretchen. But I don't think the rest of our crew really understand what I mean by abandon ship, or they're just a little bit too slow. In either case, they are almost immediately shredded. I must say, Gorgax, you orcs know how to build something to last, at least when they're not catastrophically exploding for no reason. The wagon is riddled with bullets, and everyone still on board is dead, but it's taken half a dozen rocket blasts, and it's still mostly in one piece. There's a number of fires, black smoke filling the sky, and I decide to roll the dice and crawl under the vehicle, hoping that the thing won't detonate before I reach the other side. I find Lewis. He's landed on the same leg as before, which now looks incredibly gruesome, and I drag him back towards the burning wreckage of the wagon, figuring that will take more of the enemy down from cover than in the open, even if the cover is somewhat on fire and might explode at any moment. We just about get ourselves set up when the first of the buggies reach us. Splashes of red through the black smog, machine gun barrels spinning and flamethrowers licking towards us. I have my plasma pistol in hand, of course, so I take some shots, aiming for the rather conveniently brightly coloured fuel barrels. One buggy takes flight, flipping as the back half detonates, and another becomes a splinter rain of metal and bone, and then the whole clan hits us, hurtling at us from all directions. But the thing is, Gorgax, no one is coordinating them, so they all hit us around the same time, which means they don't so much hit us as much as hit each other. You've never heard such sound, my friend. A cacophony of shearing metal and bellowed screams and burning exhausts. Entire vehicles, thrust forward by their immense engines, slammed together like giant cymbals for the amusement of your green-skinned gods. Orcs, flying through the air and throwing punches as they pass one another, some colliding and violently merging, others deposited towards a barren earth of broken rock and bone. Bullets filling what little space is left, bifurcating the scene with 10,000 crisscross lines, peppering earth and metal and flesh. It is so loud that I can still hear the ringing in my ears, and at the time I couldn't hear anything at all. We've managed to avoid the worst of it. We're in the eye of the storm, as it were, though we've taken a few bullet grazes. We've made a frantic impromptu dugout, and from there we're taking pot shots. Lewis is still hopped up on what I've given him, so he remains enthusiastic. And I'm blasting away with the plasma pistol, doing the best I can. It becomes a scrum, Gorgax. Everyone is fighting everyone. Meaty machetes are butchering green flesh, punches are landing into gnarled throats, claws driving into blood-crazed eyes. Bullets are still ricocheting everywhere, indiscriminately dropping unlucky orcs. Great shoots of flame are sweeping across unfortunate mobs. Grenades are exploding, and vehicles are exploding with them. And, for the first time in 10 minutes, I start to think that there's actually a chance that Lewis and I might survive the whole thing. But that's when I see him. A great brute of an orc, swinging what looks like half the chassis of a burning tank, stomping closer and closer. He's seen us, but my plasma pistol's just run dry, and Lewis is still out of his throne-damned mind, so I have to do something. So up I get. I draw my sword. The orc brings about his monstrous club, driving it through half a dozen orcs. And it's a good job too, for without those poor wretches slowing his swing, I'm not sure I would have been able to block it. Not without breaking my arm in any case. But it is slowed, and I parry, just about staying on my feet. He's wildly unbalanced. His weapon truly is ridiculous, Gorgax. So I take my opportunity to get beneath his reach, cutting down another orc on the approach. I slice him across the chest, almost separating him in two, but that simply seems to outrage him. He drops his weapon and grabs me, and it is as if I am being squeezed between two concrete walls. I give him a good kick in the stomach, but I think it hurts me more than it hurts him, for he doesn't seem to notice one jot. He's violently shaking me, thrashing me about, and my brain, which is already badly concussed, mind you, feels like it's rattling out of my skull. Lewis comes to my rescue, funnily enough. He charges out from our dugout, holding aloft an orc machete, screaming like, well, you, and starts swinging it again and again into the side of my aggressor. The orc drops me, bellowing some words I shan't repeat, and I crawl through the blood and dirt to find my saber as he punches Lewis to the gut and sends him flying. My fingers find the hilt of my sword just as my foe grabs my leg, and when he yanks me back, I use the momentum he's generated to drive the saber directly through his head.
Nice, boss.
Thank you, Gorgax. It was quite the maneuver. However, at that point, Lewis is unconscious and I'm feeling pretty winded, so I take the moment to take stock. Unfortunately, the scrum seems to have calmed down by this stage. We're surrounded by hundreds of orcs. However, I get the impression that they seem rather pleased with my performance, so I decide to take a chance. Mighty orcs of the 100 wheels, I cry out. What a damn fine scrap! What a proper crumping! And a few of them laugh and holler in approval, so I push my luck a little further. I am rogue trader Clintus Vanderlind, and I am a personal friend of Gorgax, the orc that slew war boss Freeboota Gorgax in personal combat. And I should rather like it if you didn't kill me. Well, a few of them laugh at that, and I start to think we have some kind of rapport going. And I suppose I'm half right, because they decide to take Lewis and I alive instead of murdering us, and instead stuff us both in those gibbets until you rescued us. At the time, I wasn't too sure of what they were waiting for. But now I suppose they knew you were alive and wanted your opinion on what should happen to us next. And now, Gorgax, you're all caught up. Gorgax nodded thoughtfully.
Sounds like a good old scrap. Why wasn't I there?
Because you were unconscious, Gorgax, you mustn't blame yourself.
Yeah. Suppose Freeboota needed to be crumped.
The rogue trader reached up to pat Gorgax's shoulder.
And now you're the war boss of the 100 Wheels.
Yeah, looks like.
Boss?
A runty grot stood quivering in Gorgax's shadow, nervously gripping at a tiny flat cap.
Yeah, what?
That Umi's awake, boss. He's asking for that one.
Alright, take us there then.
The grot nodded, wringing out his flat cap and placing it on his pointy head. He scampered forwards, taking 3 steps between every one of Gorgax's strides, jumping in fear at every footfall vibration that reverberated through the ground. The rogue trader followed on, a strange expression on his face.
He must be worried about to get.
Gorgax thought. The grot led them past half a dozen trucks, each one in various states of disrepair. Mobs of orcs performed crude repairs, banging at scrap metal with hammers, welding non-existent joints with military-grade flamethrowers. As Gorgax passed, they seemed to make a show of working harder, performing their nonsense tasks with more enthusiasm, exaggerated grunts punctuating the thunderclaps of metal impacts, and the merry whoosh of barely controlled flames. A knob punched a boy to the face, pausing to nod in Gorgax's direction before punching the boy in the face again. They turned a corner, coming across a small arsenal, grots polishing and cleaning huge cannons under the supervision of a grumpy-looking runt herd. They squeaked in fear at the sight of Gorgax, jumping to the crack of the runt herd's whip and milling about in panicked confusion. As they scrambled to look busier, a cannon accidentally fired, containing not a cannonball, but a soot-stained grot. The shrieking projectile majestically soared through the air. His screams cut short when he hit the hull of a battle wagon and became nothing more than a green spot in a sea of red paint.
Where's the git, you runt?
Not far now, boss. Just round here, innit?
They entered into something of a scrapyard. Huge piles of loose metal were thrown together, creating an adventure playground of junk and tetanus exposure, structures propped up by leaning towers of oversized tires. Orcs milled in the center, where the tangled mess of 2 collided vehicles dominated the space, each attached to a heavy chain on which the orcs yanked and heaved. The original idea might have been to drag the wrecked vehicles apart, but now the task was just an elaborate game of tug-of-war. 2 teams of orcs straining against each other and yelling abuse to the other side. Some enterprising lads had even drawn finish lines, lovingly painted with highly flammable promethium. As it was, even the game of tug-of-war was beginning to turn sour, with coordination already starting to break down within the teams. Angry prods escalated into shin kicks and the occasional flying punch, threatening to descend into a full scrap. But then Gorgax arrived and the demeanor changed. The orc straightened up, making a show of huffing and puffing, hauling on the chains like galley sailors pulling on a 10-person oar. Gorgax sniffed and left them to it. They found the seneschal at the back of the scrapyard, in a flimsy-looking hut signposted with a skull and crossbones. Inside was something of a horror show. The mushroom stink of orc blood was omnipresent. Chemical apparatus bubbled away, containing sinister bright green concoctions that smelled even worse. And perhaps most troubling of all, dozens of greenskin limbs were just strewn about, like toys hastily discarded by a psychopathic child. The doc glanced up at the new arrivals, eyes entirely out of focus and seeming to stray in opposite directions. He seemed to be drinking deep gulps from a fuming promethium can, naked but for a heavily blood-stained apron. He waved hello with a huge syringe, its point troublingly sticky. Behind him, the seneschal was strapped to something resembling a bed frame, leather constraints fixing him in place.
Lord Trader, thank the God Emperor that you are all right. Wait, Gorgax, is that you? Clintus, is that the orc?
It is indeed, Lewis. Gorgax has had a bit of a growth spurt since you were last fully conscious. How are you feeling?
Well, I can't feel anything below the waist, which I take to be an advantage at this present juncture.
Oi, Doc. What's the proggers?
The doc chuckled at a joke only he seemed to hear.
Dunno, boss. I've never worked on an Umi before, but I'm guessing he'll be needing some bionics for the backwoods stomper. I can give it a go if you like.
Nah, to get one an Umi stomper. Won't you git?
Well, yes, of course. I can't be operating on a Xenos bionic leg, let alone a greenskin one.
The doc shrugged.
Yeah, don't think it'll work on him anyhow. How's the gubbins, boss? I helped Boombox with the guts and that.
It's fine, I suppose. What's your name?
I'm the Mad Dog boss. They think I'm mad on account of me proper mad thinkings.
The rogue trader glanced at Gorgax. I don't imagine drinking promethium helps matters either.
That's where I get all my thinkings from, Umi. The oil speaks to me. The oil knows things.
Alright, enough gumph. Don't be giving the git no bionics, even if the oil tells you to, or I'll crump you dead.
Mad Doc nodded dreamily.
Don't you fret, boss. The oil thinks that Orky bionics won't work anyways.
Good. Get lost.
Right you are, boss.
Mad Doc wandered out into the scrapyard, taking swigs from the promethium can as he went. The rogue trader grimaced at the sight of his naked ass.
Clintus, if you're not too distracted, would you mind releasing me? Oh yes, my apologies. Oh, Lord Trader, we are in a madhouse.
I must admit, Lewis, this is not the direction I'd hoped the day would go. But all's well that ends well, as they say.
My knee is inverted. It's positively grotesque.
We'll sort all that, don't you worry. The flesh is weak and all that.
You think bionics grow on trees, Lord Trader? The cost alone.
Don't worry, Lewis. I'll pay whatever is needed. Besides, Tech Priest Anki Gabel owes me a favor.
That does not make me feel better.
Oh, you're never happy. But in the meantime, we should focus on the present. Gorgax has been made war boss.
Might you say that again, Lord Trader? I think I misheard you.
Nah, your listening gear's working right. I'm the boss. Well, I think so. The boys are doing what I say anyhow.
Gorgax rescued us, Lewis. He ordered us down from the cages.
Oh, well, thank you. Still, it might be wise to confirm the limits of Gorgax's authority before we take it for granted.
He has a point, Gorgax. Are you sure you're the head honcho round here?
Think so, yeah. I crumped Freakadika and no gits come to try and crump me yet. So I must be the boss.
The seneschal glanced to the rogue trader, seeming unconvinced. The rogue trader simply shrugged in response. They have a direct approach to hierarchy, it seems.
Indeed, Lord Trader.
Gorgax absent-mindedly tested his power claw, snipping at the sky.
So what now, boss?
I think that's up to you, my friend.
Huh? How's that?
Well, you're the war boss of a mighty clan. Is that what you want?
I guess so. But the lads will make a real mess of the ship, boss. And I don't know how we'd load them up.
Lord Trader, can we rule out bringing an entire orc tribe onto the ship? Might we agree on that?
I think that's fair enough, Lewis. The rogue trader looked to Gorgax, his eyes seeming pained. You understand that, don't you, Gorgax?
Yeah, suppose so. They would wreck to join.
Agreed, but that means you have a choice to make. Do you want to be war boss of the 100 Wheels, or do you want to continue traveling with us?
Yeah.
The rogue trader smiled, though his eyes were sad. No, my friend. They can't come with us, and you can't be their war boss from a distance. You have to choose between them. Gorgax paused, scuffing at the floor with his new bionic foot. Its claws dug deep into the ground, throwing up a great plume of dust and scrap that half-buried 2 grots in a shower of muck.
Nah.
You have to choose.
Nah.
Gorgax.
Nah.
The rogue trader patted the freebooter's arm.
Could it be that you've decided but you don't want to say? It's all right, Gorgax, I understand. Being a war boss is the dream, right?
Yeah,
What you always wanted.
suppose so. But you and to get on my boys.
I know, and I'll miss you very much. But how could I be one of the boys if I stood in the way of your dreams?
The question was left hanging as the seneschal crashed forwards, legs trailing behind him as he tried to navigate his way past fizzing chem tubes and the general clutter of discarded body parts. He leaned on the table and it promptly collapsed, sending chem tubes everywhere, the concoctions within leaking and burning an acrid-smelling hole in the floor. The rogue trader caught the seneschal before he fell face first into the acid, helping him cover the rest of the distance to the conversation.
Thank you, Clintus. I'm terribly sorry about the mess.
Don't you worry about that, Lewis. It was already something of a mess.
Yeah, I don't care. So he won't care. Unless he wants me to chuck him in a cannon.
Oh, well, thank you, Gorgax.
The seneschal sniffed, wiping at his nose.
I made my way over because I wanted to say something. You
didn't really make your way over, Lewis. You almost burned your face off.
Well, that as may be, I should like to interject. Gorgax, I believe Clintus is right. You are presented with a great opportunity, and as colleagues, as, well, friends, it is our duty to offer encouragement, not obstacles to your ambition.
He held out a hand for Gorgax to shake.
It's been a nightmare and a privilege, War Boss Gorgax. And furthermore, I have a confession. I like your hat.
Oh, you git. I'll miss ya.
Gorgax scooped the two humans into a hug. He smushed them against his bulk, deaf to their muffled protestations, senseless of their hands desperately slapping at his side for him to stop squeezing. Eventually, he let them go. The two humans staggered and wheezed. Gorgax's lip quivered.
You'll always be my boys, lads.
The rogue trader panted for breath.
Always. Boys. For life.
Gorgax looked away, wiping at his eye with a huge muscled finger.
And you can take the special rocks from the big hill. I'll make sure you ain't crumped.
And we'll honor the offer made to Freeboota. We'll provide all the promethium you need to take the 100 wheels across the Great Plains, and to bring war to the clans of the West.
Right. War.
Oh, come on, Gorgax. You can do better than that. Lewis, help us out. War?
War!
The three made their way out into the scrapyard. They made for an odd grouping. A seneschal, a spindly man in a curled wig, legs dragging along the earth as the other two shouldered his weight. A rogue trader, looking resplendent, if a little tired, in a mud and blood-stained coat, his hair slicked back with styling grease and sweat. And finally, an orc, double them in size, stamping along on a giant bionic foot, one arm ending in a monstrous mechanized claw. An odd grouping, varying wildly in bulk, in temperament and in species, but a group nonetheless. On the edge of the scrapyard, the three paused to look up at the setting sun. Its red glares silhouetted the stone effigy of Gork or Mork, the shadows of the mountain stretching across endless plains of arid dirt. A single coil of tumbleweed rolled across the horizon, followed by a trail of dust.
It's beautiful, ain't it?
Yes, my friend, it is.